The story begins on a gray, rain-soaked morning, when Daniel Carter arrived at the old house that had belonged to his grandmother. Daniel was 34, a man who had lived most of his life in the city. He worked in accounting, rarely left his apartment, and had always dismissed talk of the supernatural as old wives' tales. To him, ghost stories were nothing more than bedtime entertainment. But this house was different. It stood on the far edge of a quiet, rural town, half forgotten by time. The roof sagged in places, ivy crawled up the stone walls, and the shutters clung to rusted hinges. The locals called it the Carter place, and whenever it came up in conversation, their voices dropped, as if they were afraid the walls might still be listening. Daniel hadn't been back since he was 12. His parents had cut ties with the house long ago, saying his grandmother was eccentric and not well. But when the will was read, the property came to him. First, he thought of selling it, but something drew him there. A nagging memory of long corridors, of whispers in the dark, of his grandmother's warning voice. Never stand too close to the wall at the end of the upstairs corridor. Some doors aren't meant to be opened. Daniel pushed open the front door, the hinges groaning like something waking from a long sleep. The air inside was heavy with the scent of dust and moth-eaten fabric. He walked slowly, his footsteps echoing against wooden floors. The house seemed alive. Every board creaked, every draft moaned through the cracks. But what unsettled him most was the upstairs hallway. It stretched longer than he remembered, lined with faded portraits of stern-faced ancestors. And at the very end, where the wallpaper peeled like dead skin, was that strange patch of wall his grandmother had always warned him about. It was flat, seamless, no knob, no hinges. But when Daniel stood before it, he felt something. A faint vibration beneath the plaster, like a pulse. He shook it off, told himself it was nerves. That night, as rain tapped against the windows, Daniel lay awake in his childhood bedroom. The house groaned with age, settling into the night, and just as his eyelids began to close, he heard it. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The sound was faint, coming from the direction of the upstairs corridor. Daniel sat up, his breath caught in his throat. He told himself it must be a rat, maybe branches scraping the roof. But deep down, a memory stirred. His grandmother's words, "Don't listen to it, don't answer it. Some doors must never be opened." The morning after his first night, Daniel tried to brush off what he'd heard. He told himself it was the house settling, or maybe animals nesting inside the walls. Still, unease lingered. He spent most of the day exploring. Dust-covered furniture sat beneath sheets. Cabinets were filled with brittle photographs and yellowed letters. And in the living room, he found something curious. An old wooden chest locked with iron clasps. Inside, carefully folded, was his grandmother's diary. Most of the entries were rambling, her complaints about health, neighbors, and loneliness. But scattered between them were darker notes. The scratching has begun again. I hear it at night. They call my name sometimes, but I do not answer. If I do, I fear what will come through. I sealed the door with everything I could find. Still, it hums. Still, it waits. The words sent a chill crawling across Daniel's skin. That evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, he couldn't resist. He walked to the upstairs corridor again. The wall at the end seemed different in daylight. Just faded wallpaper and wood. But as shadows thickened, something about it changed. The air grew colder, heavy, as though that patch of wall was breathing. And then, knock, knock, Knock. 3 slow raps. Clear. From the other side. Daniel froze. His pulse pounded in his ears. He wanted to run, but his legs rooted to the floor. "Hello?" he whispered before he could stop himself. For a moment, silence. Then, a whisper, faint, female. "Daniel." Daniel woke again to the scratching. Only this time, it wasn't faint. It was insistent, clawing, scraping. The noise grew louder until it seemed the very wallpaper was trembling. He stumbled out of bed and down the hall. The wall at the end now looked different. The outline of a door frame seemed visible under the faded wallpaper, faint but undeniable. He reached out and pressed his hand to it. The surface was ice cold, and under his palm, he felt something pressing back. He staggered back, heart hammering. No, this isn't real. But as he turned away, his eyes caught something impossible. The portraits hanging along the corridor, his stern ancestors. Their painted eyes were no longer looking forward. They were looking at him. The next day, shaken and pale, Daniel stepped outside for air. That's when he noticed his grandmother's old neighbor, an elderly man named Mr. Holloway, watching from across the fence. "You shouldn't be staying there," the man muttered, shaking his head. "Why not?" Daniel asked, desperate for answers. The neighbor hesitated. Then he said quietly, "Because that house, it keeps things. Things that should have been buried long ago. Your grandmother knew it. She tried to warn people. But no one listened." Daniel pressed him for more, but the man only muttered, "Don't go near the end of that corridor," before retreating inside his home, slamming the door shut. That night, Daniel lay awake again. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the walls set his nerves on fire. He wanted to leave, but something about that door pulled at him. It was as if the house itself was daring him to open it. And deep down, he knew he would. By the 4th night, Daniel could no longer pretend. The sounds weren't rats. They weren't the house settling. Something was behind that wall. That evening, he armed himself with a flashlight and a crowbar. He stood at the far end of the hallway, his breath fogging in the cold air. For a long time, he just stared. The wallpaper seemed to ripple faintly, as if something inside was breathing. And then he swung the crowbar. The plaster cracked. Dust filled the air. Another strike, and another, until finally the crowbar tore through, revealing wood. A door, old, rotted, with rusted iron hinges. He wiped sweat from his brow. His hands trembled as he gripped the handle and pulled. It groaned open with a shriek that seemed to echo far deeper than it should have. Behind it was a staircase, narrow and spiraling downward into darkness. Each step groaned under his weight. The air grew colder, damper, as if he were descending into the belly of the earth. The beam of his flashlight shook in his hands. The walls around him were stone, damp, and covered in deep scratches, long gouges as though made by fingernails. At the bottom, he reached a doorless frame. Beyond it stretched a small, windowless chamber, and inside, a single wooden chair sat in the center, facing the wall. The wood was darkened, splintered, as though something had clawed at it for years. Daniel's stomach turned. That's when he noticed the carvings on the walls. Hundreds of words scratched desperately into the stone. Some were incoherent, but others were clear. "Don't listen. She waits. It's a trap." On the chair sat an object, coated in dust, an old cassette tape recorder. Daniel hesitated, then pressed play. At first, static. Then a woman's trembling voice. "If you are hearing this, it means the seal has been broken. Don't stay here. Don't answer her. She will call your name, and if you answer, she will come through." The tape clicked off. Daniel's pulse thundered. His grandmother's voice. He was sure of it. Suddenly, scratch, scratch, scratch. The sound erupted from the far wall of the chamber, louder than ever. And then a knock, slow, deliberate, answering the beat of his own heart. The flashlight flickered. The air grew colder, heavy with the scent of damp soil. From the wall, a whisper seeped through. Not muffled, not faint, clear. "Daniel, you've come back to me." He stumbled backward, shaking his head. No, this isn't real." The wall bulged outward, as if something inside was pressing against it. Cracks splintered through the stone, and then a pale hand pushed through. Thin, bony fingers clawed at the air, stretching toward him. The flashlight flickered once more and died. Daniel was swallowed in darkness. Daniel froze in the pitch-black chamber. The pale hand that had forced its way through the wall twitched, groping at the air as if searching for him. Then came the whisper again, louder, sharper, closer. "Daniel, why did you leave me here?" The voice was his grandmother's, but not gentle. It was twisted, hollow, as if dragged from some pit deeper than the earth. The hand clawed the air. Nails scratched against stone, showering dust. A second hand pushed through. Then the faint outline of a face pressing against the wall, mouth wide, eyes hollow voids. Daniel scrambled backward, heart hammering, but the chamber was small. He had nowhere to go. The flashlight sputtered back to life for just a moment, enough to show him the carvings on the wall again. One phrase repeated dozens of times, deeper than the others. "Don't answer her." And then he realized he already had. On the second night, when he whispered, "Hello," in the hallway, that was why it knew his name, why it was calling. He bolted for the staircase. His footsteps thundered on the rotting wood. Behind him, the wall cracked open further with a sound like bones snapping. A scream, not human, tore through the chamber. Halfway up the stairs, the air turned icy. His breath came in clouds, and then fingers, long and pale, wrapped around his ankle. Daniel screamed, kicking wildly. The grip was like iron. His shoe tore loose, and he stumbled upward, clawing for the door. He slammed it shut behind him, pressing his back against the wall, chest heaving. Silence. Then, knock, knock, knock. Slow. From the other side of the door, he had just say, Daniel didn't sleep that night. He sat in the hallway, staring at the hidden door. At dawn, he gathered his things. He had decided he would leave, abandon the house, burn it down if he had to. But as he walked toward the front door, something stopped him. Every portrait in the hallway, his ancestors, their painted eyes no longer looked forward. They were all staring at the hidden door, watching, waiting. Daniel fled the house that morning. Neighbors say he never came back, but the house didn't stay empty for long. Weeks later, a real estate agent arrived to list the property. She walked through the dusty halls, taking notes. When she reached the upstairs corridor, she paused. At the far end, the wall seemed to shimmer faintly in the half-light. She tilted her head, listening. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Then a voice, faint but clear. "Help me. Please, help me." She frowned, stepped closer, pressed her ear to the wall. "Hello?" she whispered, and somewhere deep inside the house, something smiled. Tell me, if you were in that house, would you open the hidden door or leave it sealed forever?